today we are joined by a guest, which will be our first guest on the Turnaround Tribe.
The very first.
Yeah. So welcome to Tracey Lloyd. We're going to talk about the perimenopause and the menopause.
And I think just before, just a quick disclaimer before we start, if you're a man listening to this, which includes us, there's a strong chance you think you understand the menopause and you almost certainly don't. So I think tonight is largely a listening exercise, I think it's important to point out. Proceed.
Okay, so I am not an expert in the field of menopause. We'll get that one out at the beginning. I am just a normal woman who has spent her life not really knowing or had never even heard of the term perimenopause. I'd heard of menopause from my mum when she went through it because she had a hysterectomy at the age of 40. So she went into early menopause and was whacked on HRT, and that was about as much as my knowledge went. So fast forward to being 42, we weren't living in Sussex, we were living in Wales. And it was a really stressful period of my life because my dad was terminally ill. So I started to notice that I was just feeling a little bit out of kilter, not sort of the usual bubbly person that I am. Started to feel very anxious, waking up in the night, mood swings. I'm sure the husband will warranty that side of things. And was getting hot sweats, anxiety and heart palpitations. And I kept kind of thinking, oh, what is all of this? What's going on? But just carried on like you do. Didn't know any better. And eventually I took myself off to the local GP and they basically said to me, you're neurotic and there's nothing wrong with you. You're just suffering with anxiety. So off I went, carried on for a little bit longer. The most disturbing thing for me was this, like waking up very hot in the night, not sleeping, coupled with these racing heart. And I thought, crikey, something's going on with me physically here. I'm a bit worried about this. So we then eventually moved back down to Sussex because unfortunately Dad died. And I took myself to my old doctors down here and said to them, can I have a general health check, please? Because I've just been a bit out of sorts for a while in Wales. And saw a female and she was great. And she did a full blood test. And I'd mentioned to her about these palpitations and she said, oh, it might be an electrical imbalance, but we'll check. And she came straight back and with my results and said, you're perimenopausal. And I said, peri what? And she said, perimenopausal. Do you know what that is? I said, no, never heard about it. And she just explained, obviously, that for most women between the ages, really, they would say between 45 to 50, you'll start to notice that you're not quite feeling yourself because you're going to get hormonal fluctuations. I was 42. I was a young starter, it seemed. And immediately she got out her prescription pad and went to prescribe me HRT. Well, back then, I was still of the era when HRT came with a lot of red flags, but that was all based on a very poor scientific study, which we discovered now. But back then, like, oh no, I'm not going on that. I'm going to have to find a way to fix myself. And that was the day when I left that doctor's surgery. Actually, I got into my car and I cried because, first of all, as a woman, to be told you're old, because they said, oh, you're perimenopausal. I was like, oh my God. And I phoned my best friend and said, I'm perimenopausal. What's that? She said. I said, I know. I'd never heard of it either. Anyway, I then decided I had to make a change because I didn't want to go down the HRT route. I will say at this point now, in 2025, there's a lot of scientifically evidence-backed research to show how good HRT is. It's all down. I actually still haven't been on HRT. And anyway, so I set about making changes to my life.
And how did that make you feel, sort of from a mentality point of view? Was there a point that you thought, because there's lots of talk about women losing self-confidence and struggling mentally during that time. Is that how you felt? And was there anything that you thought, I am not going to let this beat me, and I'm going to do this?
Yes, definitely. So I have worked for very many years as a senior manager in my industry. And I remember a visit once we'd moved back down. I was very lucky to go back to the firm I'd worked at before we moved to Wales. And I remember going in there to train and trained some new people working, and they'd updated their management system. And I remember feeling, excuse me, really overwhelmed, and really, I just, where's my confidence? I know this is my
Yeah.
life coming from, and it is really disconcerting
Mm.
when you are so knowledgeable about an industry to suddenly feel a bit wobbly
Yeah.
about it, you know. And
Yeah.
I really noticed the youngsters that were like in their 20s
Yeah.
bounding around and really relaxed about what they were doing, and there's me feeling a
Yeah.
little bit on edge and kind of
Yeah.
second guessing what I was going to say
Mm.
about that. And I have got some really interesting numbers based on a study that was done on 3,800 women that were working that were either perimenopausal or menopausal. And out of that 3,800 women, 99% of them said that menopause had had a negative effect on their career, which is huge.
Yeah. Yes.
It's absolutely
Yeah.
huge. Like 59% took time off because of the symptoms of the menopause. 21% turned down promotion because they didn't think that they were going to be good enough to do it anymore. 12% of them actually resigned because of the
Wow.
mental health effects of the hormonal changes.
It's
And the
incredible,
thing
really.
is, this isn't, sorry, KB, this isn't just a month or 2 months or a 6 month thing. You're talking years potentially.
Yeah, yeah. You can almost say that it's ongoing. So I'm now
Mm.
56. I'm now what they deem post-menopausal. And
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
sorry boys for the detail, but that just means now that once you have gone, you've got perimenopause, whilst you're still having periods, but your cycle becomes very all over the place and
Yeah.
irregular. What happens then is you become menopause because your menopause would stop. And then once you've not had a period for a year, you are post-menopausal, and that's me. That's where I'm at now. And I think something that's really important for men to understand, as well as obviously women will learn it from going through it, that I always thought that once you went through the menopause, you'd gone through it and it was, oh, you're back to normal-ish now, you know,
Yeah.
but you still get the effects of having lack of sex hormones flowing through your bloodstream, and those
Yes.
hormones affect every part of your body.
Yeah. So would
It's
it be fair
incredible.
to say that you are different when you've gone through the menopause?
Yeah, I think we're always, as you guys will know, because none of us are spring chickens anymore. Maybe you are, Tom, still. That
Thank
we
you.
that
Take that as
you
well. I'll take it.
Yeah, take it. We're always evolving, we're always changing. I think when we're kids we think we become adults and that's the person we are for life. But
Mm.
because of all the things that we experience going through our time as adults, we are constantly being reshaped. And menopause is just another one of those things that shapes you and takes you a little bit differently, off on a different path. But I do feel like I do miss my old self, and you'll hear a lot of women will say that exact line. I don't feel like myself anymore. What's wrong with me? Something's happened to me. And you've just shifted. Once you kind of realize that you've just changed, and you have to then change your perspective on how you're feeling and how you view yourself, and actually then start embracing the positives of that.
For sure.
Absolutely. I think most men, confusing thing is they tend to treat life a bit like a volume dial. You just get on with things, and that's how they tend to treat, the people around them. And I think that's where I think I've probably gone wrong in the past. You just good night's sleep, hot shower, something decent to eat, get on with it, and that's the wrong thing. That's the wrong attitude. And it's more a case of listening, not talking often, but listening is the key thing, I think, a lot of the time. Waiting for those cues, because I think, if you're missing the cues yourself in the beginning, men definitely are going to be missing those cues. I think so.
Yeah.
It's just the key thing to just less is more, definitely. So
I think that now, thankfully, it's so out there now, menopause. Perimenopause, you guys have heard of perimenopause. But if you'd asked a guy that even 10 years ago, they wouldn't have. And, people like Davina McCall, she's done such an amazing amount of work to get it out there for women and realise that we do have options and there are choices we can make. And I do think that it's very important that women help to educate their partners and their bosses and those around them, because you guys aren't mind readers. I know we all like to think us girls, or why doesn't he know this? Why can't you read
100%.
my head? But
Yes.
you're not. So, we need to help you.
It certainly helped in our household talking about it rather than Katie keeping it to herself and trying to just navigate that all herself.
Yeah.
I know that I've listened to 1,001 podcasts, and I actually became the expert in the perimenopause and menopause in our house. So Katie was certainly coming to me saying, "What about this? And what about that?" And I'd say, "Okay, let me go away and find out about it." I've got the
Yeah.
benefit of a long drive every couple of weeks, so I'm always open to a decent podcast. And yeah, it's certainly much better having the information. As you say, there's a lot more information out there. The fact that I can I could choose probably 1,000 podcasts to listen to, on the topic. What's happened now and what's happened with the sort of training advice, and how have you used that through your own journey, and how are you using it